Welcome to the webinar. We have Hannah here. She's the Director of Sales Operations, and we're excited to have her.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here today. So the purpose of this webinar is really to get an idea of what sales metrics you should be focusing on and why they matter. To start with, I really want to just show a very well-known cartoon character, Dilbert, in the business world. And I like to call this the Dilbert quandary. So in business, we're constantly fighting the issue right now. Do we go off of what the data says, or do we go off of what we've done historically and what maybe feels right to senior leadership? In this instance, pointing our boss is saying, well, let's just go with whatever I think works. And Dilbert saying, okay, well, you know, that's just going to be a problem we're going to face forever. It's a slippery slope to witchcraft. Right now, we have more access to data than ever before, but switching the mindset to a data-driven organization rather than the traditional gut check model can be a little bit difficult to do. Also, we also have the issue of too much data can also be what's known as analysis paralysis. So not knowing what to measure and not really having an idea of what it means can really cause serious issues for a company. Carly Fiorina said, the goal is to turn data into information and information into insight. In a recent Harvard Business Review article found that companies in the top third of their industry and the use of data-driven decision-making on average were 5% more productive and 6% more profitable than their competitors. That's great. That sounds like a win, right? We're always looking for ways to become more productive, more efficient, and make more money. But how do we do that? So at Dreamforce this past year, the Salesforce operations team shared their playbook, and they said you should really be focusing on 3 different dashboards: metrics, leading indicators, and a clean your room dashboard. But there's so many different things that can go into that. So really understanding what those entail and what you should be focusing on is where we start to provide that insight and that help. So I would like to propose that we look at 4 other things. We look at the pre-sales metrics, so very top of the funnel, which then feeds into the sales metrics, which is typically where we see most of our revenue. And then the post-sales metrics, which can continue to add to our continual revenue. And then finally, our activity metrics and what those mean for a company. So for pre-sales metrics, very top of the funnel, there are 3 things that you should really be measuring. First is the lead source attribution. Secondly, cost per lead or cost per sale, and thirdly, lead conversions. So for lead source attribution, what does this really mean? Well, what this is saying is how many leads are coming from each lead source that you have. And when you start looking at it in this light, you can really see where you should be putting your money. Where are we getting leads? What do those lead sources really convert to? What does it look like for us as a company? And then from there, you can start driving more insight with your cost per lead and cost per sale. So in this instance, I have a Facebook example. So it's a Facebook cost per lead, where we're saying number of leads that came in from Facebook and how much we spent for marketing spend on that. Based on that number, you can really get an idea. Maybe we're spending too much on Facebook, or maybe this is really a good source for our company to be able to continue getting revenue. Thirdly, you want to look at the lead conversions then, because understanding how many leads we're getting from each source is a great thing, but if they're not converting through the pipe, then it's really useless, right? So when you start looking at it in this light, you can see what are the total number of leads that are coming in this instance from an inbound source, what % then are scheduling a demo, what % of those have a demo that's held, and then of those demos held, what % are converted, and then of those that are converted, what percentage close. When you look at that, it can really provide some serious insight for you as a company to understand not only how much are you spending on the lead, but is it really doing anything for you as a company? Now, operations is typically fighting the battle of joining multiple different departments, from marketing to sales to customer success to you name it. And in doing that, you really have to have a good handle on what your pre-sales metrics are, because those feed then into the sales metrics and give us a little bit more insight. So for sales metrics, I want to focus on four main ones: your close rate, your conversion rate, your average sales cycle, and attain to forecast. So for the close rate, this is really saying what % of your closed pipe close wins. It's a little bit tricky and can often be confused with the next one, which is what % of your pipe close wins. But in this instance, it's really showing of all of your deals that you have for that month with an expected close date of that month or quarter, whichever you're looking at for your sales cycle, what percentage of that is actually close winning versus entering a close stage. When you understand that, it can really help with historical forecasting to understand you have X % of deals that you're looking at closing, and typically, historically, you've only closed maybe 30% of that. So now moving forward, you have a better understanding of how to do future forecasting and predictions to really be able to get some more insight on what you as a sales leader should really be sending up the chain for your number that you're going to convert. The second one is very similar, and this is where people tend to get a little confused. It's your conversion rate. And this is just saying what % of your pipe, all open pipe with an expected close date of, again, that month or quarter, close wins. Now, this is really important when you're looking at future forecasting because it really gives you a good idea of historical trends. You can look at this month over month, year over year, to get an idea of what you should really be using when you do your sales leadership forecast. Too often, sales leaders give a number that really they pulled out of the sky or they think leadership wants to hear, and they're trying to figure out how do I get to that number. But if there's really nothing to substantiate that or back it up, then you end up either getting really lucky and hitting that number or failing. So really being able to say, this is what I know I have in the pipe, this is what I know I typically close of that pipe, and then using some maybe gut check analysis from there can really help you be a little bit more firm in your future forecasting and hitting that sales number. The next one, average sales cycle, is kind of an interesting metric. What this really is saying is how long does it take on average to close a deal? But you can even take it a step further to say, okay, of all these deals that we have open, some of them have significantly extended the average sales cycle. So are these deals at risk? Are they being sandbagged? Are there things that maybe we need to be looking at with regards to our pricing or our sales pitch that could help speed that up? So it gives you a good idea of really where the risk is in a deal, and if you use these as a basic benchmark. So the last one is one that most organizations are pretty familiar with, attain to forecast, but there's a lot more you can do with this than just looking strictly at your plan. When talking attain to forecast, you can start looking at what have you currently hit for the month or for the year or the quarter, however you want to measure that, against what did you do last year historically compared to what is the sales leadership forecast and what is the company plan. When you start looking at that, it's going to give you a good idea, again, for future forecasting and trending. Are you hitting plan? Are you on track? Is your sales forecast too high? Is it too low? It provides a little bit more insight than just saying, I think I'm going to call this number for the month and say that's it. When you can really start delving into the analytics and saying, yeah, last month I closed, let's say, 300K. This month I'm expected to close 350K. How do I get there? Well, if you can start looking at, again, month over month, year over year, what you've done, what the historical patterns are, the trends are, it gives you a good idea if you're on track to hit that, if sales leadership is forecasting too high, if maybe the company plan number is unrealistic, and it gives you time as well to make a plan to be able to hit it by the end of the year. So this is really important, again, when you want to start looking at how are we doing as a company and how are we doing as a sales organization with regards to our forecasting and future trending. Now, sales is great for getting revenue, but it's also extremely important to understand post-sales what's happening there. Because if your attrition is too high, or if you're not really stable on the product and you're not really doing a QA out with the customer base, then you have no idea really how you're going to be able to perform future trending or what your ARR is going to look like moving forward. So I want to focus on Net Promoter Score and customer retention rate. So with the Net Promoter Score, it's really a good health check to say, how are we performing in the eyes of our customers? You can go out, you can survey the customer base, figure out really how they're doing, and that gives you a good idea of if you as a company are stable as a product, if there are maybe a few things that you could fix right away that would up your Net Promoter Score, and it gives you a little bit of time to make those corrections so you're not being reactive, you're able to be proactive in getting a better product and a happier customer base. Now, it's also extremely important to look at your customer retention rate because this is going to show what your churn is. Are you growing? If you are trading faster than you're making sales, then you might have a record sales month, but you're still shrinking. So in order to really understand this, you want to look at what did you sell for the month compared to what was your attrition for the month. And that gives you a good idea of, are you progressing? Are you continuing to grow? Or are there some areas where maybe you should look at focusing on it to be able to improve and then to be able to continue to hit the company plan? If you're not looking at your net and your gross rates here, then some of the issues that you have, you can't fix by the end of the year by the time you have to hit your company number. So this gives you a good idea of how you're doing and how you can get ahead of it before it gets to the end of the fiscal year. So there's a question from the audience. Is this a customer satisfaction survey? So yeah, so for the prior slide, when we were talking the Net Promoter Score, what this really is, it can be. So you can send out a survey to your customer base, and it's based on it goes from a negative 100 to a positive 100. Anywhere in that range kind of shows you how you're doing. So if you're at 0, you're pretty much at a 50%. So being able to understand what those numbers are, this is a national survey and a national score, can give you a good idea. If you just Google NPS score, it'll give you a really good idea of how to measure that, where to find it, and what questions you should be asking. Okay. So finally, activity metrics. A lot of times people discount really what an activity can show you. But I would like to argue that activity metrics are extremely beneficial for a couple of different reasons. One is if you're having some sales reps that are really struggling to be able to close, this gives them an opportunity to get ahead of that. They can start making more calls, more emails, more self-sourcing, mining, doing things that are going to help with future growth. Now, sometimes it can also be used to really identify if there are specific issues. For example, if you've had a sales rep who historically was blowing calls, emails, and mined leads out of the water and just had really great numbers and then all of a sudden seemed to plateau or drop, that can really be used also for coaching to identify, are there areas that they're struggling, or are they looking for work elsewhere? Are they not satisfied? Is there something else going on? I've been at companies before where we actually did do that, and we would do one-on-ones with the sales reps, and from there found several reps who were looking for work elsewhere, and we were able to get ahead of it and turn that around, and it saved significant overhead costs, because anytime you lose sales reps, that leaves a gap in both your selling base as well as your overhead costs. So it can be really influential when you're looking at coaching as well as making sure that you understand how your team is actually performing and feeling. So those are the main metrics that I wanted to focus on today. I've got a couple questions that have come in. First is, if I'm at square one, where should I start? It's a great question. There's so many different things you can look at and focus on. Honestly, I would look at, if you haven't really had any historical sales or any data to date, look at today where you're starting to get your leads from and start at the very top of the funnel, because if you can follow that the whole way through, you'll see the sales come, right? If you understand where your leads are coming from, and where you should be spending your money, then as you invest in that, you'll be able to start selling more, closing more, and then you can focus on post-sales. Also, looking at activity metrics would be huge if you're starting out from scratch, because it's a leading indicator of success. So if you can get more of those activities in, that'll help with training and with habits, and as well as filling your pipeline. That's a great place to be in. So that's all I have for right now. I will have the slides available in a follow-up email for anybody that would like them. If there's any other questions, I'd be happy to take them. My email is hannahb@grow.com. Feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to respond. Thanks, and have a great day.